just because, as Whoopi said, Tom Hanks joined the sketch, bringing back the character of Doug, because
The ladies of The View have outdone themselves yet again. This time, they reacted to Tom Hanks' controversial Saturday Night Live skit, where he portrayed a white, Christian Trump supporter in the most predictable and insulting way possible. The skit immediately sparked backlash, with many viewers calling it tone-deaf, divisive, and straight-up offensive. But if you've watched The View long enough, you already know exactly who found it absolutely hilarious. Not only that, but in classic View fashion, they somehow managed to connect a Canadian plane crash to Donald Trump because, of course, everything bad in the world must be his fault. It was yet another episode full of absurdity, arrogance, and outright denial of reality. But this time, they didn't just push their usual nonsense, they exposed exactly why the left keeps losing voters. Tom Hanks' SNL skit wasn't just a joke gone wrong. It was another example of Hollywood's deep-seated hatred for conservatives, Christians, and anyone who doesn't conform to their ideology. Hanks reprised his role as Doug, a church-going, right-wing Trump voter, appearing on Black Jeopardy, a parody of the classic game show. The entire premise of the skit was to make one thing clear: Trump supporters are dumb, racist, and completely out of touch with reality. It's the same tired narrative Hollywood has been shoving down America's throat for years. Conservatives, especially white conservatives, are fair game for mockery. But the hypocrisy is glaring. SNL would never run a skit mocking a liberal activist crying over microaggressions. They would never portray a Hollywood celebrity ranting about climate change while boarding a private jet. They wouldn't dare depict a radical leftist college student screaming about safe spaces. But a white, Christian Trump supporter? That's always on the menu. Whoopi Goldberg wasted no time defending the skit, dismissing conservative backlash by saying it wasn't new. According to her, because this character has appeared before, Trump voters shouldn't be upset. That logic is laughable. Imagine if SNL constantly mocked a different minority group with tired, offensive stereotypes.
Why it's so annoying, I'm sorry, when people talk about wokeism, because, for years...
Would Whoopi tell them to get over it because it wasn't new? Of course not. But conservatives, especially Christians, are expected to sit there and take it. What makes this even more insulting is that The View has spent years calling every single Trump voter a racist, fascist, misogynist, or Nazi. They've never acknowledged the millions of minority voters who support Trump. They've never entertained the idea that someone could vote for him without being a horrible person. They simply push the narrative that all Trump supporters are the same. Enter Sunny Hostin, who somehow managed to deliver the worst take of them all. She argued that the skit wasn't actually mocking conservatives, but was instead a subversive piece about Black culture being American culture. That's a complete misreading of what happened. The skit wasn't about culture. It was about Hollywood's open disdain for anyone who doesn't share their worldview. And then Sunny really showed her hand by saying something even more absurd. Jeopardy is basically white Jeopardy. Think about that. She's suggesting that a trivia game based on general knowledge is inherently white. That is the real racism on display. The idea that Black Americans can't compete in that format is insulting beyond words. And then she doubled down on her victim narrative, saying she knows this because she was once on Jeopardy and lost. This is the left's playbook in action. When something doesn't go their way, it's not because of personal failure. It's because of racism, oppression, or injustice. That's why Democrats have lost touch with reality. And it's why so many people, of all races, are walking away from their party. The skit might have made sense in 2016 when Trump was new, unpolished, and controversial. But in 2024, he won the popular vote. He made historic gains with Black, Hispanic, Asian, and working-class voters. The idea that Trump's base is just old white racists is not only wrong, it's insulting to the millions of minorities who voted for him. But people like Sunny Hostin refuse to acknowledge that. In her mind, if a Black or Latino voter supports Trump, they must be brainwashed or misguided. They can't possibly have valid reasons for rejecting the Democrat Party. But Sunny's delusions didn't stop there. When discussing the election, she smugly said, "I'm part of the 92% of Black women that voted to save the rest of the country." That arrogance is exactly why people are rejecting the left. According to her, only people who voted Democrat are the good guys. The millions of Black and Latino voters who switched to Trump, apparently they don't count. Democrats have convinced themselves that if voters reject them, it's not because of their policies.
The people that have been affected are maintenance mechanics, aeronautical information specialists, environmental protection specialists, aviation safety assistants, and management and program assistants.
It's because those voters are just too ignorant to know what's good for them. That attitude is repelling people in droves. Americans don't want to be talked down to. They don't want to be shamed into submission. They want real solutions to real problems, and that's exactly what Democrats refuse to provide. If you thought things couldn't get worse, Whoopi Goldberg decided to defend wokeism, claiming it was actually a good thing. According to her, the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement were forms of wokeism. That's completely false. Those were legitimate fights for justice and equality. Wokeism is something entirely different. Wokeism is inventing oppression where it doesn't exist. It's pushing the idea that America is a fundamentally evil country. It's arguing that gender is a social construct. It's claiming that math is racist. Wokeism isn't about fighting real injustices. It's about creating problems so activists can feel like heroes. That's why so many Americans are rejecting it. People are tired of being told that white people are inherently racist. They're tired of being told that Black people are still the most oppressed group in history despite holding powerful positions in every sector of society. They're tired of being forced to pretend that men can get pregnant. And most of all, they're tired of being lied to. But just when you thought the insanity was over, Sunny Hostin delivered her most ridiculous take yet. She actually blamed a plane crash in Canada on Donald Trump. She tried to argue that because Trump made staffing cuts at the FAA, he was somehow responsible for a crash that happened in another country. Reality check. Trump is not in charge of Canada's aviation system. There is zero evidence that his policies had anything to do with the crash. But that's how desperate Democrats have become. Instead of admitting that their policies have failed, they just blame Trump for everything. Gas prices? Trump's fault. Crime? Trump's fault. A plane crash in another country? Somehow still Trump's fault. This is why people are done listening to them. Instead of offering real solutions, they just scream about Trump. Instead of addressing the actual problems facing Americans, they tell us that the real issue is white supremacy or misinformation. Meanwhile, their own party is completely out of touch with what voters actually care about. Trump's America First agenda is more popular than ever. His policies on border security, the economy, and foreign policy resonate with everyday Americans. But instead of listening, Democrats just double down on calling their own citizens racist, ignorant, or evil. That's why they're losing, and it's why they'll keep losing.